been someone that has kind of exercised my entire life, but it wasn't until I started working with you that I truly feel like my overall fitness, like training for life, has gotten significantly better. Um, so I kind of wanted to break that down for people, like specifically. So,
Hmm.
like almost like principles of strength training. Like, what are the things that, because I know a lot of people strength train,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
what are things that you like are important? Because all
Yeah.
the community that you have built, you have people ranging from, I mean, what are the ages in there?
26 to 76.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And like, what are the principles? Let's start with the strength training first.
I mean, so movements aside, like yes, you push, pull, hinge, squat,
Yeah.
split leg. Yeah, we know that, right? I think like truly being honest with working where you're at. You know, I always say regress to progress in my very Southern way, because I think finding a variation of a movement that you can do all the volume required
Yeah.
at an appropriate range of motion and an appropriate quality, I think is key. Because, we hear pull, push, hinge, squat, and we think it has to look like a gym shape. And what I tell my students is all of our shapes look very different. My shape looks different from my 76-year-old mama who takes all my classes. And that's okay because we're on our own trajectory. And I think this is something that I encourage all of my students and clients to do: stay on your own trajectory and stay out of other people's Zoom box. Like, I think that's kind of the biggest thing: finding a variation where you can actually sit in the work.
Yeah.
Progressive overload is another one. We get very comfortable with moving our same weights around because humans like to be comfortable. And I think being okay with this is just work, not getting emotionally attached to it, I think is key. Because you'll see people, they'll start to struggle and they shy away from it. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I want 5 to 6 reps at that struggle. Like I want to see the ugly face just a little bit. And I think that that's key. And people just don't like to push themselves.
Yeah.
I think those are like the two big ones in my opinion.
All right. What about VO2 max? Like,
Oh, aerobic conditioning,
that's,
my favorite thing.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's the hardest thing. I mean, it's crazy how hard you have to push yourself as you age.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You really do. You always have to work just a little bit harder. And it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating because you're like, I just want to chill. But the older you get, the harder you have to work. You just do. I think first of all, I don't think that your VO2 max needs to be 2 decades younger at an elite level. I just don't think that I don't think that's attainable for most people, which turns into too big of a hill to climb, and it makes you just not want to do it. Yeah, there's all sorts of studies that if you're deconditioned or if you are obese, stairs look steeper than they actually are because it's a protective mechanism. So if the hill is too big to climb, it's much easier to just stay at the bottom of the hill. So I really don't like to talk about that stuff with a lot of my clients and patients because, I just want to know where you're at today and see a little bit of progress next time we do it. That's kind of my focus. Would I like everyone to be above average? Absolutely, in terms of normative values, but we're all where we are, and as long as you're trending in the up direction, that's a big win. But VO2 max is extremely important, and training for VO2 max is extremely important as long as you're not training so much that you're putting yourself at orthopedic risk. And I've seen some of my patients that are so fixated on getting this high, high, high number, their bodies break down because their machinery is just not equipped to take that volume.
Um, thoughts
The
on zone two stuff?
Thoughts on zone two. It does not replace daily life activities. And I think that that's one thing that zone two has been so buzzy for so long.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, I did my zone two, but they're not taking more than 2,500 steps a day.
Yeah.
And I think the impact of NEAT is just really massive. And I don't think that we give it enough credit because I know so many people that go to the gym for an hour and then they sit on their ass the rest of the day and they're extremely metabolically unhealthy. Um, and, you know, to the credit of your book, like more people are more cognizant of walking, like how just walking is so amazing. I have to thank you because my mama actually read your book and bought a treadmill.
Aw, I love her.
I was just like, she goes, I'm reading Courtney's book. And I was like, she just recently retired. I was like, I don't think I've ever known you to read a book, but I'm into it. She goes, she's like, can you tell me which treadmill to buy? I was like, absolutely. I'll send you a link.
I love her. She's the best.
Yeah, so it's great. But I don't think that we value that enough. Like, yes, going to the gym, picking shit up, getting your aerobic work in, all of this is important. But if you're not like doing stuff around the house, taking out your garbage, going to the grocery store, all of these things are just truly invaluable. They're too simple for people to comprehend that that's a big part of your overall health, but it's probably like the biggest piece of the pie.
Yeah. Perez, were you gonna ask a question?
it was back to the VO2 max because I think in certain circles that's something that like people are actively training for, and in certain circles I still feel like that's a foreign concept. So what
Yeah, yeah.
like some of the standards of like when you mentioned weightlifting, you're like you should be weightlifting at least 2 days a week. Like how often
Yeah.
kind of training are we
So,
talking about?
yeah, I think if I could have someone doing an ideal week of aerobic training, I would have them do one steady state day, whatever that looks like for them, just to like get on, work, do some things, maintain your like fatigue resistance. I'd have one hit day that's actually like, you know, 2 to 5 minutes of work at a high intensity, and then at an intensity that's high but can also be repeated. So
Mm.
not so high on the first one that you gas out and you kind of dwindle. Like I want high, 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 high. And then, doing some like sprint interval training, some power work. This is something that is extreme. Like if people don't do it at all, and people don't understand what it means to get your muscles firing really fast and get that quick muscle activation. But it is crucial for aging. It's crucial. We lose, especially women. We're kind of at a deficit anyway for muscular power. Our fiber types are just different than men's. So it's important to train power, but especially as you age, it just makes everything much easier.
Which is
Um,
daunting for like when people hear power training, they're like, "Oh no, I'm not an athlete. I don't need
yeah,
to."
yeah, yeah. But like my power training could look like this. Like let's get on the bike, and it can be real simple. At the end of their warm up, I'm like, okay, 15 seconds, I want everything you got on this bike. And the cool thing is 15 seconds, it's not even enough to really get your heart rate that high. Your
Right.
lactate levels aren't going to go up. So it's more like neurally activating than it is, physiologically. So it's if you present it that way, and then I'm like, you work really hard for 15 seconds, and then we get to like light spin and chat for 90. Isn't that great? Because I want them to be able to hit that high intensity every single time. But it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't, and it is because people are like power. Whoa. With my rowers that have been training forever, I'll have them really push hard. But like, you know, for someone who's just a gen pop human, I'm like, let's just push really hard. And I'll do 4 or 5 rounds at the end of their warm up. And I'm like, cool, we did that but it's really helpful to add it like that. But the power work is really important. So I would have 3 days a week. If you can't you know, if you can't do three or commit to three, at least one hit session. And that's if you're walking a lot. Now, someone who is completely deconditioned, that's where zone two is extremely beneficial because you're kind of building their foundation to be able to push. Um, yeah. But for most people who like are active and they just want to supplement, I would be like hit or sprint interval training.